Onto a major motorway project in Northern Ireland, which has been put on hold over climate concerns. The A5 has long been considered a dangerous stretch of road, but farmers say interfering with their land is not the solution.
Well, GBNews' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has this report.
A £1.7 billion project in limbo. The A5 connects Northern Ireland from Londonderry through Omagh to Ballygawley. But its future is in doubt after a court ruled the construction did not meet climate change targets set by politicians in Stormont. Locals have called for upgrades on what they say is a confusing roadway. More than 50 people have died on the A5 since 2005, and heavy goods and agricultural vehicles only add to the dangers. Properties and farming land were vested by Stormont for the construction, a decision that has locals angered and left in the dark without compensation. Neville Robinson is one of the affected, whose farmland was made redundant for nearly a year.
On the 25th of November, the government vested this, so basically put me out of business. That's almost 250 odd days ago.
While Neville supports the project, he says it has now cost him over £30,000 this year.
They have yet to tell me how much I'm going to get. They have yet to say there's money for you. They haven't told me how much they're giving me. They haven't told me whether they'll replace the chicken house. So we're sitting in a limbo at the minute. We don't really know who owns the house.
Ulster Unionist Party Deputy Leader Robbie Butler is the chair of the Agricultural Committee, firmly placing the blame on civil servants for the lack of departmental communication.
What hasn't happened here is there's been no oversight of the project, there's been no interdepartmental working, and I would ask questions of perhaps the permanent secretaries to understand exactly what their joint ambitions have been, not just for public safety, but for the very viability of our farming and agri industry in that area.
In a department letter seen by GBNews sent to those affected, it says as of the 27th of June, land has been returned to owners, and the department will now seek to agree reasonable costs for the reinstatement of vested lands. Stormont's Infrastructure Minister Liz Kimmins is set to appeal the High Court's decision, but upgrades to the A5 remain on a road to nowhere. Dougie Beattie, GBNews, Ballygawley.
Well, Dougie Beattie joins us live from outside Stormont for us now. Good afternoon, Dougie. How much is this motorway needed, and what are politicians saying about it now?
Well, it is really needed. That road is very confusing. It goes from dual lane to single lane on one side of the road, and then all of a sudden the opposite way round. It has a lot of traffic travelling on it, and Cameron, I have to say, every person that I have talked to, every landowner, every farmer, are not against the road. In fact, Neville had a couple of his relations killed on that road. It is a very dangerous road, multiple entrances and exits on it, and it has been in the pipeline for decades. But just a couple of years ago here, the Stormont executive passed net zero laws, and when it went to a judge to an appeal, the judge then said that it was not compatible with the net zero laws that they have passed, i.e. pulling out trees, rediverting rivers, tarmacking over the top of fields. And that is true, and politicians have to understand when you're elected for the people, by the people. So the state has to be fair on everybody, and unfortunately that hasn't happened. Letters of compensation did come out on Saturday, and I have to say there is going to be court action over them. That one particular chicken shed, £4,500 he was offered in compensation after he's lost £30,000 this year, and they've offered him £10 a day to rent the shed.
OK, Dougie Beattie, thank you very much for joining us. It looks like that is going to be kicked down the road a little bit longer. Well, this comes as the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch said her party will remove all net zero requirements on oil and gas companies drilling in the North Sea if elected, and vowed to maximise extraction rather than moving away from fossil fuels.
Well, joining us now, environmental scientist Christian Dunn. Christian, I mean, It's costing us quite a lot of money, really, to try and facilitate net zero. And so far, we are still taking oil and gas from countries all over the world, and we're looking to close ours down. Wouldn't it be wiser to use what you have and your own resource whilst you're building a net zero infrastructure? Wouldn't that be wiser?
I think that you make a really good point there. We do need a bridging technology to get us from where we are now to net zero, which we must get to. Using our own oil and gas is arguably a better thing to do, but it must only be seen as a bridging fuel or technology to get us to where we want to be. And that has to be more sustainable sources of power and renewable sources. But crucially, we have to move towards nuclear. If we want to be driving electric cars, vehicles, trucks, etc., we need a lot of very cheap power, clean power. Nuclear is probably going to be the only way that we can do that in any sensible time period. But it has to be a sensible time period, and we have to now start ramping up our use or infrastructure for nuclear. We have to start doing that, as well as all the renewable sources as well.
OK, but look, nuclear, you say it's a clean source, but don't you need uranium? And aren't they mining uranium in places like Niger? And there's a lot of toxicity around the environment whilst they're mining it. It's clean for us when we're using it, but for those extracting it, it's very unclean.
Also as well, there is the waste as well. Nuclear is
exactly plutonium.
It's most certainly not perfect, but at the present time, it is the cleanest source of vast amounts of power that we have. So we have to be starting to move towards it. There are other ways that we can do it as well, with small-scale nuclear reactors and these sorts of systems as well. We have to start moving towards that, as well as renewables. And we have to start rethinking our use of renewables. Not just these, as you're showing now, these massive wind turbines onshore, which can cause a lot of various issues, especially if they're built on peatlands, and offshore. But we have to start thinking about microgeneration. How is it that any developer is allowed to build any number of dwellings or a new supermarket or anything like that, and they don't have to produce X amount of power on site? We have to start moving towards microgeneration as well. We have to start looking at all these options as quickly as possible.
Christian, how have we got to this point? Of course, this current Labour government has only been in power for, well, just over a year now. And you talk of nuclear. As far as I'm aware, the last nuclear power station was built more than 25 years ago in this country. Is it a lack of investment from consecutive governments, Labour or Conservative, that has got us to this point where now we're kind of having to put more money into investing in net zero, which is obviously driving up bills, which is putting people off?
Yeah, indeed. And there's been a lack of appetite to grasp the nettle, as it were, when it comes to nuclear, because it is going to be expensive. And, you know, there are lots of regulations and legislations that have to be sorted out to get there. And I think we've all, I suspect, all governments have understood that they need to move towards nuclear and, you know, different ways of using renewable. We just haven't wanted to tackle it. I mean, look at our history of these large-scale infrastructure projects. Look at HS2. So the country needs to get a lot better at these sorts of huge projects, which is what nuclear is going to need, and renewable on a vast scale. We're just not really there. We need to get there.
Well, countries like Norway, Norway's a great example. They supply a lot of their energy and electricity through hydropower, wind power, fossil fuels, solar energy, bioenergy, and actually waste. I don't think they're using much nuclear. Well, I just think the idea of nuclear is great, but again, people seem to dismiss the fact that it's toxic at the end, at the point where you're extracting the components that you require to create it, and everyone seems to dismiss that.
I wouldn't say they dismiss it. In fact, I'd say the opposite. I think that one of the reasons we've not got nuclear is people fear the waste so much, and quite rightly so. We have to be careful of it, but we fear the waste so much. But no source of power that we can have, if we want to live in a modern world and move forward and advance technologies, no source of fuel is 100% clean. Wind still produces waste, you know, with the actual infrastructure. Always there's going to be some element of waste here, and we have to be pragmatic about that if we want to move forward. And we must move forward. There's no point in looking backwards. We have to move forward, progressing, growing. We have to have cheap power to do that. Look at the price of power in this country, one of the most expensive places for electricity. If we want infrastructure, business
It's not going to. I'm afraid I don't believe that they'll make it cheaper, even if we are providing it. And it'll cost us trillions to get to net zero if it's actually a reality and a worthy thing to be pursuing. I'm not so sure that it is. But listen, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. That is, of course, Christian Dunn. He's an environmental scientist.